Hey, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining from. And we are delighted to have with us again today Anne Baring. And as most of you know who joined last time, Anne has had a wonderful life with many chapters and careers, including traveling the world and being a dressmaker in London, and has written now 9 books. And the final book, she tells me it's the final book, is Divine Wisdom and the Holy Spirit, the Forgotten Feminine Face of God. And I'm putting the link in the chat where you can order it when you're in the UK, directly from the publisher. And shortly it will also be available on Amazon around the world, and you can order it there. And Anne has been working for, I believe, over 5 decades on the feminine principle and the divine feminine. And so she really has this wealth of wisdom, having looked through the lenses of different cultures, different traditions, different time periods, also with her background as a historian. And I personally have learned a lot from reading Anne's work and listening to her webinars and podcasts. I've had several times now some epiphanies that have actually really changed the way that I teach some of my very regular content in leadership development. It's helped me understand more the relationship of the feminine principle to, for example, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's helped me understand more how some of the challenges that I think we're facing, particularly in leadership roles in business and in politics, and I should say many of the women here hold roles in leadership roles in business and in politics. It's helped me understand how many of these challenges I believe are a challenge that stems in part from our loss of an understanding of the feminine principle in ourselves and in the world, and how to relate to it with sacredness. So this session today is building on the session that we did with Anne last month, which was a really in-depth and beautiful look at the feminine principle and the divine feminine through a historical lens, how we lost her and in some key moments. And today we're looking at how can we reawaken, rediscover, reestablish the feminine principle in our own lives and in the world more broadly. And so with that, thank you everyone for being here. And Anne, thank you very, very much for not only sharing your time with us, but for this lifetime of work that you've done and the ways in which you've cultivated yourself to be able to share this wisdom with us today. So I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's a great pleasure to be with you all. And this is a strange sort of talk. I didn't know how to do it. It kind of built itself. So it has elements in it of different spiritual traditions, and it has a lot of elements about how we can understand our psyche better than we do, because really there's no knowledge of the psyche in our culture whatsoever, unless you're in Jungian analysis. So I'll start here saying that the feminine is primarily about relationship. And so this talk is about relationship with the deeper aspect of ourselves. Now, you will know from the last talk that there have been 3 phases, basically, in the evolution of consciousness on this, of human evolution on this planet. The first phase was that of the Great Mother. The second phase we're still in, is the phase of separation, when we have duality and polarization, and the mind and the soul have become separated from each other. Cosmos, God, and the world are seen as object rather than experienced as something within us. And now we're coming just to the cusp of the final phase, which is called the stellar phase, is what the alchemists called it, when mind and soul become reunited. This was the alchemical dream. And we have the conscious participation in an ensouled universe, with union with the divine ground and mind and soul being reunited. So that's the background, as it were, to this whole talk. So the current situation in the West, as I see it, is we have the dying of the old image of God. But it's interesting that many young people are joining the Catholic Church in this country, which is a new development and very interesting because it shows that they're searching for what is missing. So we have the dying of the old image of God. We have fundamentalist ideologies filling the vacuum. We have an aggressive secularism, and it really is aggressive, influenced by scientific materialism. We have an addiction to technology, possibly leading to transhumanism, and the technological enslavement of humanity. Now, I'd like you to remember this. It's in the chapter 13 of my book, but it's very important that you know about this and are aware of it. And there is a man called David Hughes who has traced this enslavement back to the Nazi era and has written a book called, I don't know whether you can see this here, but I can give it to you afterwards in the chat anyway. But that's an introduction to a second book that he's written, but this is just all you need at the moment. But you'll show how the techniques of Nazism were being applied recently in the COVID, 4 years of COVID. So we have a threat to democracy and human rights. And the cause of all this is that there's no relationship between mind and soul, as there hasn't been for at least 250 years. And the masculine and feminine principles have been drawn apart, as it were. So that's the sort of background of what we're in now. In 2024, the global population was estimated at 82 billion, with approximately 4.5 billion men and 4.01 billion women. So there's very little difference between the male and the female elements on the planet. For millennia, women's lives have been focused on the home, on the bearing and nurturing of children. They have had to accept whatever was imposed on them in the way of religious indoctrination, wars, and the social obligations and customs set by society's religious and secular beliefs. It is essential now that women become aware of the creeping totalitarianism imposed during the COVID years. This totalitarianism originated with NATO. NATO was behind the lockdowns, the masks, and the vaccinations, and the psychological manipulation of people through propaganda and the deliberate creation of fear. And these techniques, as David Hughes shows in his book, originate in the era of Nazism and are being reapplied now quite consciously by what's called the deep state. And the role of women is hugely important in challenging the tendency to impose more control on people and to manipulate them through propaganda. But they urgently need to become more aware of it because many women haven't the slightest idea, including myself, that this was going on until I began to think and look around me and learn things from people who were telling me what I didn't know. So I'm passing all this on to you because it is very important. Now we're entering a period of tremendous change, and the alchemists called it the Negredo, or the phase of blackness, when nothing makes sense and all the structures on which civilization has been built are weakened or are collapsing. For millennia, women have tried to adapt themselves to a culture governed by men and by the masculine archetype. They have tried to copy men, adapting themselves to the behaviors of men in order to enter and be accepted by a male world and be acceptable to men. At first, they met with huge resistance and outright hostility and ridicule, then with grudging acceptance. Then they took on male exploitation of women, above all the sexual exploitation in the Me Too movement a few years ago. But now women and men are being called into a true partnership with each other, working together in many different areas to create a better world. And this is already happening in many different spheres, which I can't go into, but you can find them on the internet. There are many men working for stopping war, for instance, many organizations to do with that. And there are many men working in the field of helping in any way that they can, particularly in wars. Now, there's always been an imbalance between the masculine and feminine principles going back 4,000 years. The masculine principle has been given the supreme value for the last 4,000 years in patriarchal cultures. This does not apply to indigenous cultures. This may mean that both women and men unconsciously give the highest value to the masculine principle and may not be sufficiently aware of the feminine one and the feeling values that originate in the heart and the soul. Society has been organized until very recently according to what men have created in many different fields: in government, religion, education, business, medicine, and the organization of the community. They've done a huge job when you think of it. It's amazing what they have achieved in all these different fields, which they were called to do because they were needed, so to speak. They were needed in all these different fields. But the supremacy of the male over his wife and children may also be established in the home, particularly in Muslim countries, but also in Christian and secular homes. The image of God the Father in the patriarchal religions has had a profound influence on men and on the organization and direction of society, politics, and religion, which I'm sure you'll understand when you give this a bit of thought. Perhaps you already have given it much thought. Now, in the West, the main focus has been on the mind and on the outer world. They've explored everything to do with the actual formation of nature, the world, the cosmos, everything that they can possibly look at with the mind they've done. But there's been a big lack there. And the culture of the East, what I call the nighttime culture of the East, the focus was on the soul and the inner world. So you have these two contrasting, as it were, kinds of worlds, one absolutely focused on the physical aspect of reality, and the other one on the inner, invisible aspect of reality. It is so beautiful that they now need to come together, and that this has been planned, I think, that they should come together. So the outer world, which has been governed by the ego and the conscious mind, there's nothing wrong with the ego. We need an ego to actually live in this world. We need it to do all the daily things we need to do. But it is basically masculine and solar, and it's focused in the mind and the head. And then you have the inner archetypal world of the soul, which is the lunar world of the feminine and the heart. So you have the contrast between the head and the heart. And these need to come together. They need to be united. The solar and the lunar dimensions of the soul need to be brought together, because this has never happened. We have the East and the West, but we have no marriage between them. So from Vedic times in India, 10,000 years ago, the greatest spiritual teachers of India were recognized as masters of the path to the experience of enlightenment, or union with the divine ground. They taught their followers to look inward to the source of consciousness as the invisible ground of the world we perceive with our five senses and our ego mind. This was a tremendous gift to humanity that has not been really recognized. But at the same time, the different teachers, the shamanic teachers of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity, all spoke of our indwelling, divine, immortal nature and the path to the experience of it. All four inspired the most sublime art, particularly architecture, sculpture, and painting, and all four brought specific gifts to humanity. The Hindu Upanishads brought the divine indwelling Atman. The Buddha Siddhartha brought the idea of the indwelling Buddha nature. He said, you have a Buddha nature, but you don't know it. It can't work through you as long as you don't know it. We have Lao Tzu and Taoism and the need for a profound relationship with nature. And we have Jesus or Yeshua and the kingdom of heaven within us and spread out around us, although we do not see it, he said in the Gospel of Thomas. The kingdom of heaven is spread out around us, but man does not see it. So there are the four. I haven't gone into Islam because I don't understand enough about it, and I don't think it's right to talk about it if you don't understand things. So that's the basic four that we have, that they've given wonderful teachers to us and wonderful teachings, but they haven't really been assimilated properly and applied in society. So these are the basic concepts in Hinduism. First of all, reincarnation. We do not only have one life, as in the beliefs of the West, whether Christian or secular. We have an infinite vista of lives, and the purpose of these many lives is to evolve from an unconscious state to a fully conscious one, or a state of enlightenment or union with the divine ground. This is the sacred marriage in the Eastern traditions. Secondly, there's the concept of karma. Karma is closely associated with the idea of reincarnation and the idea of a moral universe. The essential idea is that your actions have effects. If you do harm in one life, you make reparation for it in future lives. If you do good, you reap the effects of your actions. And thirdly, they had the concept of enlightenment, which they variously called samsara or moksha, which is cosmic consciousness, which is what the Buddha had on the night of his enlightenment, or the experience of the nature of reality, the actual experience of it. I haven't had that experience. I only know of it, but I can speak of it because I think I know enough about it to speak about it. The essential teaching of Hinduism is that we have two natures, a human and a divine, a mortal and an immortal nature. And the teaching of India's greatest seers or shamans was to help us to become aware of the divinity dwelling unrecognized within us, that they themselves had experienced. This teaching was a huge evolutionary advance for our whole species, and I think it hasn't been recognized as such. Atman is the name they gave to the indwelling divine self in every individual. They saw that everything that exists, whether manifest or unmanifest, is Brahman, the supreme deity. They saw that the divine essence of every individual is Brahman, and that Atman, the indwelling divine self, is also Brahman. All this universe is in truth Brahman. He is the beginning and the end and the life of all. I urge you all to read the Upanishads because they're incredibly beautiful and incredibly profound, and they will change the way you think about everything if you read through them. Just a little bit, not all at once. I'm going to give some more at the end. Now, I'm coming to the principal Jungian concepts and the concept of individuation or soul growth, because Jung saw that the Hindu concept couldn't really have been applied in the West, that the West wouldn't take to it as the Indian psyche has taken to it. It's alien, as it were, to the West. So he developed, as much as he could, the concept as nearest to it of individuation or soul growth, leading to the same experience of what he called the self. He didn't give it the name of Atman or God or Christ, he called it the self. So first of all, we have the persona that I'm speaking to you with, the persona that you react to the world with and that you act in the world with. It's very important. When you have the ego, which you need to function in the world, and the conscious, rational mind. Then we have the personal unconscious, which I'll come to a diagram later on, and then the shadow, and the anima and the animus, which I'm going to talk about shortly, which are part of the shadow because they're called the shadow because we simply don't know what exists within us. So it's as it were, the darkened aspect or the shadow aspect of ourselves. And beyond that is what he called is the collective unconscious, which in India are called the Akashic records. And it's really, I think collective unconscious is not the right term. It should have been the greater consciousness, because that's what it is. But it's unconscious in relation to the conscious mind that we have, because we don't know that we have it. So therefore, it's unconscious. But the more we become conscious of it, the more it becomes the greater consciousness that we're in touch with and that we're surrounded with and that we are part of. And finally, he had the concept of the self, corresponding to the Atman of Hinduism and the indwelling Christ of Christianity, although he didn't make the connection specifically with them. So I wanted to give you this because now I'm going to go more into Jungian psychology to give you more idea of what goes on inside yourself. So in this diagram, I've tried to show you the little triangle at the top is what most of us live through because we don't know anything else. This is what we've been brought up to live through. This is what our lives are created through and directed through, so to speak. But in the personal unconscious, that is, in the experience of our own lives, we have all the memories of our parenting, our school, our societal influences, forgotten traumas and experiences that we may have buried because they seem to be not worth talking about, or we didn't even remember that we had them. And in that also is the formation of the animus and the anima, which is the contrasexual or contragender in each woman and man. So in woman, there is the animus, and in man, there is the anima. I'll come to that in a minute. And then deeper than the personal unconscious is the primordial soul, what Jung called the primordial soul of the collective unconscious. And this is all the instincts. So this is everything that connects us to nature as we are part of nature. And it's impossible to describe, but it's all the memories and habits and traumas of evolutionary experience on this planet. So I think the Akashic records in the Indian system describes it very well because it's the record of everything that we've experienced since we've been conscious beings on this planet. I hope that's all clear, or as clear as I can make it. But we can return to it afterwards if you want to ask some questions. Now, going deeper into the instinct part, the primordial soul, we have three brain systems. We have the reptilian system, which is the oldest. Then we have the mammalian system, which is all the sort of experience as our animal past, as it were. And then we have the neocortical experience, which is the foremost forward part of the brain. And all that is stored within us in different parts of us. And the reptilian brain holds our oldest instincts. And in mythology, it's been portrayed as a great serpent or dragon. The dragon is the part of our nature that has caused the male addiction to war for thousands of years and is still causing it today in the wars that are tearing humanity apart and devastating the lives of millions of people, leaving them deeply traumatized. Now, this pattern repeats itself over and over and over and over again, has been doing so for 4,000 and more years, until we become conscious of what we've become, as it were, addicted to or entranced by in a way. It's very, very difficult to break the whole of the deepest instincts within us, because it's difficult to become aware of where we've been taken over. When we are taken over, we are in a state of possession by the instincts. So this is what's happening now. This is from Ukraine, the cultural devastation caused by war. I've just brought a few pictures here to give you an idea of what the reptilian brain can do. The agricultural devastation caused by war, the ruining of all the crops, the wheat, and the trees, burning of things that should never be burnt. And the structural devastation caused by war. But the greatest devastation is that inflicted on the human heart, particularly the heart of the child, who may never recover from what it has experienced and witnessed. When you think of all the thousands of children who've been witnessing this ghastly scenario and experiencing the terrible pain of losing parents or grandparents or brothers and sisters, it's simply indescribable what we inflict on other people without knowing how terrible it is what we're doing. So this is all the reptilian brain. But the dragon or great serpent in mythology guards a treasure. And many myths and fairy tales speak about a hero facing and overcoming the dragon, as in the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece, which you may remember from your childhood. And this overcoming the dragon, as it were, making friends with the dragon, not killing the dragon, but making friends with it and getting to know why it is behaving in the way it is the supreme task of humanity. And it has been the supreme task ever since Jesus was trying to teach what needed to be overcome 2,000 years ago. He didn't call it the dragon, he called it the master of the world, or the ruler of the world, or Caesar. Those were the three terms he gave the dragon, so to speak. I hope this makes sense to you as I'm going along. So the treasure is relationship with spirit. And this may be visualized as a relationship with someone who is immensely older or wiser than we are. The greater self within the soul manifests through the strengthening union of the conscious mind with the unconscious. It can become the wise companion, friend, and guide whom we can learn to trust. This guide, which can be understood as the spirit, can be either feminine or masculine or neither. The self may appear in dreams as an animal, as a human or angelic being, or as a building such as a church or cathedral, or many other forms. I will tell you just two aspects of the self which were in my dreams. One was a golden mammoth chasing me. I was running for my life away from it instead of turning and facing and embracing it. But how could you embrace a golden mammoth? And the second appearance was as a tiger, a male tiger, who came through the door, through the walls of my bedroom, and lay down by my bed and suckled from my left breast. And that was a most marvelous image of the relationship with the instinct that was beginning to form then. And I also, at earlier time, when I was being chased by the golden mammoth, had a dream of a black panther who was mad and caged up. And that's another image of something that was caged in us that we need to get to know. But I was naturally terrified of the panther. I didn't want to know he was there in my psyche. And so I ran away for a long time until I understood what was trying to communicate with me. So initially, the self or the spirit may reveal itself in dreams as a baby or young child, as well as the other aspects as an animal. Then a partnership can grow between these two aspects of ourselves, the conscious mind and the greater self or spirit within our nature. And this partnership will manifest in some kind of creative engagement that serves life and is directed by the heart. It won't be to do with power, ambition, celebrity, or anything else of those values, but it will be an engagement with the heart and an expression of the heart, what it wants. So the result is, I love this picture, the transformation of both dragon and man, so that the dragon becomes the companion and helper of man instead of the enemy. This is miraculous transformation, it really is. And this is what needs to happen in the collective psyche if we're to survive as a species. We need to make friends with the dragon, understanding where the feelings of hatred, revenge, envy, bitterness, destruction, the wish to destroy, the addiction to destruction, the addiction to making weapons and war. All this is the dragon that we have to transform. It's a huge, huge task. It is the task of humanity. So I hope I've made it clear to you. Now I come to the animus and the anima, which are the contrasexual aspects of the psyche or soul in woman and man. If all goes well, they connect the conscious mind with the collective unconscious and the creative depths of the soul. Generally speaking, men and women have no idea that they carry this other gender within them. This other gender can act as a friend or an enemy, depending on the programming one has received from parents, education, and social media. In the extroverted culture in which we live, there are no values or ideas to take women and men beyond their conscious mind and the limited goals presented to them by the media and politicians. Woman, the feminine, and the soul are devalued by the culture and the media because neither are aware of the existence of soul or spirit, and there is no awareness of the psyche. If you look at all the newspapers, what they're all about power and the situations we can get into if we don't understand anything. They form the bridge. The animus and the anima form a bridge between the conscious mind and the deeper dimension of the collective unconscious, or the soul. They act like a filter through which the woman or the man relates to life. They can connect the conscious mind with the creative depths of the collective unconscious. But if they are blocked or crippled or wounded by childhood trauma or by faulty upbringing, or the culture's distorted image of the masculine or feminine archetypes, then they cannot perform their true function. And this is very important to understand, because in millions of people, the animus and the anima are blocked. They can't really create fully because they've been programmed in the wrong way. And they're functioning at a very limited part of themselves. So the creativity of the man or the woman will be injured or blocked in some way if the anima or the animus have been injured. So here I come to the two hemispheres of the brain, which is a very important part of our existence, joined together by the corpus callosum. And we've overdeveloped, according to a man called Ian McGilchrist, who's written and talked very widely on this. You can find his talks on the internet. We've overdeveloped the left hemisphere, the logical, analytical, controlling hemisphere, and we've closed down the right one, which is the imaginative and intuitive one, which relates us to the universe and to nature and to the whole cosmos, so to speak. So this is terribly important to understand, because all the emphasis of our education is on developing the left hemisphere. We don't have nearly enough emphasis on art, on music, on poetry, on dancing. All that side of the expression of feeling is neglected, mostly because there's no money for it. But this used to be the case. The right hemisphere of the brain is the first to develop out of the heart of the embryo at 21 days. And the heart is connected to all the vital organs of the body. In the adult, the electromagnetic field of the heart is 500 times more powerful than that of the brain, and it extends 10 to 25 feet beyond the body. It has over 40,000 sensory neurons, and the heart is our connection to the deeper presence of the quantum field. That's just been discovered by an institute called HeartMath. They've done tests about this. So the heart is vitally important. The right brain is 90% image cognition, connective ability, imagination, painting, music, poetry, mathematics. We have to a great extent lost the connection to the right hemisphere because of the emphasis in education on developing left hemispheric skills and neglecting the right hemispheric ones. We need to reconnect with the right hemisphere and develop the eye of the heart. For any of you who have children, it's very important to put the emphasis on doing things with them which develop the right hemisphere as much as you possibly can. And in your own lives as well. I love this picture of the journey of the sperm to the egg. There are thousands of sperms, or millions of them apparently, but only one gets through. And this makes the primary union of the male and female elements of life. Such a beautiful image. And this is the picture of the embryo at 21 days. And the right hemisphere of the brain will emerge from the heart. And the left hemisphere is formed after the right one. So this is what we all were at 21 days. Such a fantastic image. Birth has become mechanized in modern culture. It is no longer treated as a miraculous event requiring the most sensitive handling. The mother is dismissed far too soon from hospital with no time to rest and recover and connect with the new life that she has given birth to. Maternity services are inadequate with not enough trained midwives to assist women giving birth. There was a wonderful Frenchman called Le Boyer who developed a method of handling the birth of a baby that was absolutely wonderful, which had a great influence. There was somebody else whose name, unfortunately, I can't remember, but he also had he invented the water birth, for instance, the other man. So there were two extraordinary Frenchmen who did see that there was a need to develop a greater sensitivity to women giving birth, and that this was a natural process which needed to be helped with conditions that would assist the woman and not frighten her and not prevent a happy birth in a way. Pain is part of birth, but with the right kind of handling, it can be an amazing experience. I remember with my daughter's birth, the gynecologist and my husband were discussing football over my body. And I finally got furious and said, shut up, both of you, and pay attention to what's happening to me. I always remember that. But anyway, my husband was there at the birth, which was nice. So all this can lead to anxiety and depression. Drug taking and alcoholism are very prevalent in our societies, and children are increasingly affected by depression. Negative, even dangerous influence of social media on children. The connection to the heart may be blocked because the whole emphasis of the culture is on extroversion. And so children develop a fear of life rather than a love of life. This is so important. They get anxious. Am I good enough? Am I clever enough? Am I this enough or that enough? Am I pretty enough if I'm a girl or whatever? So pornography doesn't help. In fact, it's a terrible, terrible infliction on children. So this is the result, is anxiety and depression. So we come into life with no memory of where we've come from and what our past life or lives were. But we bring with us inherited gifts from our parents as well as our own specific gifts, often coming from past lives. And these, together with the difficulties we may encounter and will need to overcome, can be found in our astrological birth chart, which will indicate the position of the planets at our birth and their relationship to each other. This chart may give us some insight into what our life goals and gifts might be, and why we have incarnated on this planet at this particular time. That's quite important for people to know, that their lives are important because they've chosen to incarnate now at this time. And why have they chosen to incarnate, and what are the gifts that they're bringing through with them, what they need to develop. Now, the animus in a woman's psyche is the unknown masculine aspect of her soul. The animus is formed by her experience of her father and other men, as well as by the animus of her mother and the patriarchal view of woman she has absorbed unconsciously as she grows up. The animus is the carrier of masculine values and abilities. Above all, and this is most important, the power to manifest creative ideas and values from the deeper unconscious or soul into the world. We need the masculine to be able to manifest what it is our creative instinct wants to manifest, so to speak. For many centuries, woman has silently carried the feeling values of man's soul for him, but she has not been able to express her own ideas, gifts, and feeling values. Her voice was silenced until very recently. Now this is changing as the relationship between man and woman is changing. This may arouse great anxiety in men that will be expressed as anger, contempt, and the desire to control. But on the other hand, may be expressed in real longing to work together with a woman and create together something, which is happening quite a lot now in our culture. So a helpful animus is essential to a woman for her creativity to flourish. If she has a negative critical animus, an inner critic who is hostile towards her creativity, she will be unable to express the longings of her heart. And the same applies to the anima of a man. This is quite complicated, but I'll tell you a dream I had when I was in analysis 40 years ago. The dream was that I was sitting in bed with a golden pen in my hand, and behind me, I wasn't aware, but another part of me could see that there was a man with a knife creeping up behind me. He was going to plunge the knife into my back, which is into the unconscious, as it were. And fortunately, my analyst was able to help me understand the dream, as this was what was blocking my writing. And from that time, I began to want to write, which I hadn't dared to do before because I thought nobody would be interested in what I had to say. And anyway, I didn't know how to write. So the negativity in my psyche was absolutely blocking my creativity. And that man with a knife was a very good example of a negative animus, what Jung called a negative animus, blocking and even killing the feminine. So a woman's relationship with her soul, her creativity, and her happiness may be affected by the positive or negative quality of her relationship with the inner masculine element in her soul, the animus. A negative animus can be a devastating inner critic, undermining her creative ideas and her relationships with both men and women. Many women are crippled by being unable to trust their feelings and their voice because the negative animus interferes with this. This negative animus has been formed partly by parental influences and partly by cultural and patriarchal values. It has to be made conscious by writing down what it says and challenging it. So, for instance, with my dream, I say, "Why do you want to kill me?" And then the animus will answer whatever he wants to say. He might say, "Because you pay no attention to me." And then I say, "Well, how could I pay more attention to you?" And he might say, "Well, just listen to what I'm trying to tell you, that you can be better, but you don't have to be a genius in the first instance. You know, one can have a dialogue like a fairy tale." So growing up in modern culture, woman may follow the superficial values promoted by social media and be unable to connect with her soul. As a result of trying to follow these false values, she may suffer from anxiety, depression, or anorexia, particularly in young women. Depression can be understood as a call from her soul to become aware of her heart and the need for a deeper, more conscious relationship with life. So remember that if any of you have depression, this can be understood as a call from your soul to become aware of your heart. Do not take antidepressants. Try and find out what the relationship with your heart might be. It is important to bear in mind that the male attitude to women that regarded them as the inferior gender and necessary only as carriers of man's seed has existed in patriarchal cultures for the last 2,000 to 4,000 years. And this attitude is still deeply imprinted in the unconscious of both men and women today, although it has changed enormously over the last 70 years or so since the Second World War. Men are now sharing some of the care of children and women, which they didn't do in my mother's generation. And women have entered the arena of the world in a variety of professions, which again, they didn't do in my mother's generation. This is something in my generation has accomplished, as it were. This is all helpful and positive, although not without problems and challenges. Woman in particular has had to carry the strain of trying to bring up children and hold down a job, which has created a great strain on her, and also looking after elderly parents at the same time. So I'm looking now at the anima aspect of man's psyche, the unknown feminine aspect of his soul, is formed by a boy's experience of his mother, his teachers, and other women, and all the images and roles of women, past and present, that he's encountered as he grows up. The anima is the carrier of his feeling values. For many centuries, man has projected his anima or his soul onto woman, and she has carried the feeling values of his soul for him. But her power to articulate these values was very limited. Now this is changing as the relationship between man and woman is changing. For countless centuries, man has had to conform to the values of his age, to his peer group, to the masculine ideals of power, control, success, dominance, and the repression of his feelings. No man was allowed to cry in my father's generation. The exceptions to this were the artists, the poets, the musicians, and the shamans and mystics, which, thank God, existed throughout this time. So as a man's relationship with women and also his creativity or lack of it, and his happiness or unhappiness may reflect the positive or negative quality of his relationship with his soul, the inner feminine or anima. A negative anima can be a devastating inner critic, just like my inner critic, undermining his sense of self-worth, his creativity, and his relationship. Since so little is known in our culture about this, and our educational system does not create the best conditions for a relationship with the anima, It is likely that many men are crippled by being unable to relate to the feminine aspect of their nature or to values that go against those of the culture, because men have always been taught to look down on the feminine and to look down on women as a lesser species, as it were. So it's very difficult to go against that in a culture which is always saying, well, you've got to be more masculine, you've got to do this, you've got to be more successful, you've got to make more money, etc. All that is going against the feminine. They may suffer from depression because of this, and depression can be understood as a call from the anima for him to become aware of his feelings, his heart, and the need for a better and deeper relationship with the feminine and with life. So this is an image of what the artist can produce, who is in touch with his anima. Beautiful painting by Henri Rousseau, who lived 100 years ago, just at the turn of the 19th century, and painted the most marvelous images of the jungle, and this image in particular, which I love. And there is the feminine sitting in the middle of nature. So there are three major influences on the child. Collective attitudes and religious beliefs come from school and university, and parents also, and the parents' behavior towards the child, and also the parents' relationship with each other, which is very important to remember. Now, it is important to remember collective attitudes about women and men in relation to the formation of the animus and the anima. We have religious attitudes, particularly Christian and Muslim ones, the attitude to sexuality and the body, and the attitude of men towards women. Social attitudes influenced by school, university, the media, celebrities, etc. And attitudes and habits absorbed through early female teachers and general education. Good teachers who encouraged children and bad ones who discouraged or criticized or frightened them. The role of the teacher is immensely important. So the first influence on the formation of the feminine value is woman, and of the anima in man is their mother, because she is the primary experience of the feminine. Children derive their feeling of value from the way the mother treated them from infancy onwards. If their experience of the mother is positive, they will trust themselves and life, and they will have an optimistic, trusting approach to life, which they will view as essentially benevolent, to be enjoyed and valued. Out of this early experience, young adults will develop a relationship with their heart, expressed in some kind of work, which gives them joy and fulfillment. The influence of grandmothers is very important. Many brilliant chefs have been taught to cook by their grandmothers, like Raymond Blanc, for instance, among others. What was your experience of your mother? Was she loving, warm, tactile, in touch with her feelings, or was she distant, cold, rejecting, and controlling? Was she happy or unhappy? What image of life did she offer you? And what was the atmosphere in your home life? Was it calm and happy, or was it tense and with the children frightened? If the mother was experienced as negative, as frightening, cruel, rejecting, or controlling, children will grow up with no feeling of their own value, no trust in themselves or in life. They will experience life as something threatening, to be mastered and controlled through their will, copying the model of control of the mother. The need for control is transposed to the body. So we have anorexia and the desire to change one's body into another kind of body. Their relationship with the feeling values of the heart will be blocked because of fear, distrust, and even hatred of the feminine. Their relationships with women and men will be affected by this, and a woman may reject her own feminine nature and her body. A man may search for the perfect woman who will replace his mother or treat women badly, even violently. And we have somebody called Andrew Tate, who's a perfect example of that, who has been damaged in some way and who's treating women appallingly and is proud of it. So the loss of the mother in childhood through untimely death may have a profound effect on a child's life and trust in himself or herself. It will leave a deep trauma, particularly if the child was unable to express his or her grief, guilt, anger, and sense of abandonment. However, this trauma may, as an adult, lead him or her to a life of intense creativity, possibly influenced by the love flowing to them from their mother in another dimension. Out of this unbearable suffering can come sublime creativity in the form of music, art, poetry, or some form of gift to humanity. On the other hand, it may lead to depression, self-destructive patterns such as alcohol, drugs, and even suicide, tragically. So what was your experience of your father? Was your father warm, loving, interested, and encouraging towards you? Or was he cold, distant, critical, disapproving, and dismissive of your feelings and interests? Was he a bully, controlling, physically violent? Were you frightened of him? What was your father's nature like? Was he a happy, creative, and generous-hearted man, or was he unhappy, depressed, angry, and critical of everyone? How did your father treat your mother? With love and respect, or with irritation, contempt, or even cruelty? Was he kind and thoughtful to her, or was he a controlling bully? This page is immensely important because it has such an effect on women, the way what their father was like and how he treated the mother. Terribly important. So the relationship between the parents is very important also for the impression that the child receives of the relationship between the two archetypal principles held by the mother and father. A child needs an atmosphere in the home of security, calm, and order, as well as encouragement and support to develop a strong conscious ego and the feeling of delight in being alive and being himself or herself. There will be a good relationship between the head and the heart as the child grows up. Humor is very important in this. If the child laughs and loves things, makes funny jokes and things, that's a good sign. These influences are immensely important for a child growing up in a happy or unhappy household. A son or daughter can carry the burden of the father's own lack of relationship with his anima, or the mother's lack of relationship with her feminine value if she is silenced and controlled by the father. As adults, they can copy whatever pattern they absorbed in their own relationships with partners later on, unless they become consciously aware of it, which is very rare because very few people go into therapy. So the loss or absence of the father will mean that unless there is a close male relative who fills the place of the father, the daughter or son will have no male role model to follow and will find it difficult to trust themselves and discover their path in life. Many children grow up today with no father in the home, where the mother is the sole wage earner, or where she has multiple partners. This is disastrous for the balance of the child's psyche. The father's support is vitally important for the child's confidence as he or she moves into the competitive adult world. The absence of the father or a critical father has a profound effect on the child. So the effects of divorce, obviously profound. It's very confusing for the child as the two archetypal principles are torn apart within his psyche. However, living in an unhappy home where the parents are constantly quarreling or the father is abusing the mother has the same effect, or vice versa, I should say, has the same effect and creates a deep wound. This also applies if the mother marries again or has serial partners. Everything will depend on what kind of man she chooses and whether he can replace or improve on the original father and what kind of relationship they have. And this applies if the father chooses another feminine partner, as it were. So guilt and self-blame, this is where they originate, the negative animus or anima. The child may unconsciously blame herself or himself for the loss of a parent through divorce or death, and it is here that feelings of inadequacy, failure, and self-hatred begin. A negative critical animus or anima is constellated that may lead to self-destructive patterns later on in life. Simultaneously, there may be the beginning of a will to power over life, so that the pain and grief of the loss of a rejection by a parent is never experienced again. And I put Trump in brackets because Trump had a terribly destructive father, and his whole life has been to prove that he's okay, that he's good enough, as it were, that he was not good enough to please his father. So these wounds are carried in the personal unconscious and need to be made conscious before they can be healed. Otherwise, they are acted out in society. So the child is like a plant, and the way the parents treat the child and the way they treat each other can nourish the child's soul and help it to grow into a healthy plant or strong tree, or destroy the child's soul as with a pesticide. So I've given a graphic image there of what happy child is and a child destroyed by the pesticide of the parents' influence. So this is just a brief example of what happens when the conscious mind is possessed by the traumatized or wounded shadow, the deep unconscious. Then it behaves with a will to power over life. And we can see this all over in all the wars going on. And in the political scene, we see it every day with a struggle for power between the different parties or different individuals. And these are really examples of people who've been taken over by the will to power of the deep instinct and are completely unconscious of it. So I won't go into it any more than that, but you can think about that as an image of what happens when the wounds are not healed and addressed by people as they go through their lives. And these traumas may result in women and men being unable to relate to their feelings, identifying themselves with their rational mind and their intellect, and shutting off access to their feelings altogether. So we have examples of the brilliant intellect, but no emotional intelligence. And Yuval Harari, the spokesman for the WEF, is a perfect example of a man whose soul has been cauterized by something in his childhood. He cannot relate. He has no feelings. He only has an intellect and mind, and a brilliant one at that. But this may also apply to many scientists or technocrats and to those who work with nuclear or other weapons that harm life. These men carry a wounded anima. And a wounded animus or anima, together with a weak ego, may also result in women and men being swept off their feet by powerful ideologies and political movements because they are emotionally unstable and in danger of being taken over by the will to power of the unconscious instinct in other people. They fall for it, as it were, to the spell. They fall under the spell of other people who are driven by the will to power. Now, I'm coming, I think, if these traumas and wounds to the soul can be recognized and understood, then the process of healing and releasing ourselves from possession by a negative animus or anima can begin. If this healing work is not undertaken, these wounds are the source of negative projections onto others, including collective negative projections onto other nations or people. A woman who is possessed by the power drive of her negative animus will project all kinds of hatreds and resentments onto men in general, and there will be great difficulties of relationship with them as well as with other women. And a man who is possessed by a wounded anima will project his hatred and fear of women onto women in general and will have great difficulty relating to women on a personal level. Through the collective unconscious and the quantum field, we are linked to each other through an invisible web, and what we do as individuals affects the whole web. So the work we do with our psyche is of vital importance in affecting the whole web of life of the entire planet and even the cosmos. You can't separate anything out. So here I come to an image of the sacred marriage, which is one of my favorite images by a woman called Emily Balivet, who's a wonderful artist. She did this years ago, but I've used it in my book and I use it many times in my talks because here's a beautiful image of man and woman coming together, holding the grail of enlightenment and the inner marriage expressed in this form of the outer one. And here we have a beautiful alchemical image of the same thing, of the relationship between the inner and the outer. the inner marriage with the inner partner, ultimately the marriage with spirit. This is from a beautiful book called Splendor Solis, written in the 15th century in Augsburg, in Germany. So I see it's 4:05, which is nearly the hour. So if I can stop here, I have about 5 more slides. Which would you like me to do you think?
Well, I know that there are questions. I wonder if we should do a few questions and then see if we have time, because I'm
Okay,
very curious
really, I go back into the East.
about the Eastern teachings.
I think perhaps this is time to talk to turn to questions.
Yeah.
And having drawn to the, as it were, the climax of the talk so far, I was just going to go into a few beautiful Upanishadic sayings, but that can wait till the end, maybe. Okay? So I will undo the screen. How do I unshare screen? Stop share. There we are. Okay, there I am. There you are.
Thank you, very much. And so why don't we turn it over to questions? I have about 10, but I also can ask you those later, so I'll give space to others. What is arising, and what would you like to ask? And if you can't use your microphone for any reason, write in the chat, and I'll read out. Oh, Amy's already written. I was wondering if we could go back to the dragon of the man and understanding what this means. Could you say more about the dragon of the man? I think this is when you were looking
Yes,
at.
well, the man with the dragon right behind him means that the man is in touch with his instinct. He's not possessed by it. He's not overwhelmed or driven by it. He's in harmony with the instinct, which means that the whole creative power of his psyche can be directed towards something creative, something nourishing and good for the humanity. Whereas if he's in bad relationship with that dragon that's just standing behind him, he's in a state of possession virtually, and he doesn't know it because you're taken over without being aware of what's happening.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious. To be honest, I was also curious because I think it's more than a year ago or 2 years ago. I had an experience where I was having a very intense dialogue with a good friend, and we were sitting at a bench, and then this wolf-like dog came and very quietly and came and sat next to me, and it was a very strange experience. And so somehow this and I was very calm and happy about it, but my friend was very surprised to experience it. So it felt like, and later on he commented on it and he asked me, do you understand what it meant? And I said, anyway, so that's why I asked the
I think
question.
what it means is that you were in good touch with your instinct and the dog knew it.
Yeah.
And came and sat by you because he felt safe with you. Okay, thank you very much. Good question.
Thank you so much, Anne, for this tour. And I also have a question at the beginning. Somewhere you said, which is very hopeful to me, that the East and West are coming together, and you kind of go back to it with a sacred marriage. But you said something about this being planned, and I was like, how do you view that being planned? And
because I had a channeled message years ago which said the East and the West are being brought together. This is part of the divine plan. That's why I had that.
it's the divine plan in which we are living.
In which oh yes, all of us are living within the divine plan for this planet.
And we can be instruments for
Yes.
bringing the feminine and masculine together, which I think is such a theme.
Yes.
This time,
so
maybe
bringing East and West together, masculine and feminine together, two aspects of relating to life together. And it is happening. We've had so many Buddhist teachers come here and set up monasteries, for instance, and many people have gone to them. We've also had Paramahansa Yogananda in the last century had a great influence with Hinduism. So we've had the influence of the East.
Yeah.
Many people like myself going to the East and learning from it as well and bringing back the knowledge. And all that percolates. It makes like a great broth or cauldron of elements which create the final soup, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I was speaking actually with Ami and Litu, who's also on the call today, about, life from the outside in and from the inside out, and how in the whole system thinking, the kind of from the outside in is still pervasive, and how we're bringing it is also from the inside out.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
that's, I think, what I'm trying to say, that attention to the psyche is important for bringing the inside out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pamela. Oh, you're still muted. Sorry, I've muted everyone just to prevent noise.
Hello, thank you both, Sophie. Hello, and also Anne. Our children were brought up much more in an Eastern way of thinking, which the more I hear you speak, the gladder I am. I have a question, comment. I'm glad to hear you being optimistic. I obviously, from my voice, live in the United States. We're in a very dark time right now. And I was interested, and when a lot resonated with me about especially young men who, as you may know, all seem to be, a large portion of them helped this person who we now has president become president because they needed something that they obviously had missed. And a lot of the people in charge right now seem to have a very deep lack of connection to their spirit and soul, or they wouldn't possibly be able to do half the things they're doing. So my question is to you is that we ourselves are living in a transition, and it's hard for us to continue to, well, we have methods, obviously, meditation, to continue to move forward with this hope. I do see the other happening. I just wonder if you could comment a little bit more on the positive things that you're seeing, or whatever you want to comment on.
Well, I will say that there were elements of the old order, the Biden order, that needed to be changed and looked at, which were not functioning well. Above all, the health system, which I do believe that Robert Kennedy is addressing, and I think that's a huge advantage. If he isn't assassinated, it will be wonderful, because he really will look into autism and what the vaccines have been doing and all that sort of thing. So that's one aspect. The fact that Trump has got where he is just something that you have to live through. It's what I said in the beginning, that the alchemists call this is the negredo, when everything falls apart. You can't find your foot in your footing in what's going on, because there's no way of relating to it. You just have to sit in the middle of the whirlwind, focus on your inner life and your relationships with your husband, children, and immediate surroundings, and wait till it blows over, which it will, because it's bound to change into something different sooner or later. It can't go on at the same intensity and with the same, it's not exactly cruelty, but the same ruthlessness as what's going on now, because it's a totally ruthless image that you have now of the presidency, doing exactly what he pleases, making peace or war in Ukraine, taking the Ukrainian valuable elements for himself. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just, this is an example of the instinct taking over and possessing a man. He is possessed. And you're dealing with someone who is possessed, and probably with Musk as well, and a group of other people. I'm 3/4 American, so I do know what's going on in America and follow it. So you have a group of very powerful men, immensely wealthy, who are using their wealth to achieve the ends that they want with total ruthlessness and with total ignorance, total ignorance. There is such a thing as the spirit, and that there is such a thing as a different way of relating to life. And it's like a storm, a cyclone that is blowing over you. But I do think it will pass, and that because the Constitution of America is very strong, and he actually has no business, according to the Constitution, doing what he's doing. He could be removed at any moment, according to the Constitution. So just hang on to the thought that you'll get through it. And don't worry too much about it. You can't change it. But you can just stay quiet in yourself and keep your children calm and not upset and worried about everything. And just keep a general atmosphere of calm and just the feeling that we will get through this. But it may take several years.
And hope also that there are enough parents bringing children up so that the young men, especially right now, women for different reasons, but the young men who are lost, well, we're all lost, but somehow we need to make sure that all the children are being brought up in a much better way. So that's my wish for humankind.
Well, they do. It's my wish too. But I think there's a lot that needed changing, and particularly the number of vaccinations children have to be put through in America, I think is catastrophic for them and must be stopped, and Kennedy will stop it. So that's one good thing there. But the bad things are all the other things, and his behavior on the world stage and the tariffs and all that sort of thing. I mean, he's just gone mad. But it'll calm down. Once he's had his splurge of instinct, so to speak, I think he will become more balanced, perhaps, and calmer, and will be subject to better influences. That's all I can say, and hope for the best. Thank you so much.
So, Anne, did I hear right? Instruction within that is in this kind of Negredo time where we can't necessarily change what's happening around us, and it's difficult to get a kind of footing. It's a moment to do what we can to remain calm ourselves or create calm environments around us and do sort of more of the inner work.
Absolutely, yes, because you can't really get into the outer world without destroying yourselves. It's much better to stay calm and within the inner world and your daily life, that the things you like doing and helping other people, looking after your families, whatever it might be. Don't worry too much about the outer world. It's always been the outer world. It's always gone on since Roman times. Think of the fall of the Roman Empire and what was going on then. Think of the French Revolution. Think of all the great upheavals in time. There always have been things like this of terrible periods. Think of all the women sent to the stake in the 5 centuries of Catholicism in Europe. So, you know, there's been terrible, terrible things that have happened, but it isn't necessary for you to get involved with them unless you're in a position with your job to have an influence. That's different, and then you can act in whatever way you feel is right, but always with the intention within to stay with your heart and not to just get into the power thing. If I had more power, I could do this, that, or the other. That's the wrong way to go.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Others, questions? Esther.
Yes, I have a question. You were describing the role of the parents, how they behave towards their children and towards each other. I'm from a family with 7 children, and we do have completely different experiences. The way we recall our youth, and that has affected the relationship with the parents differently. So can you comment on that?
Well, I can't really comment to say that that's an interesting observation, which I'm sure must happen. I'm sure it happened in my own family with only 3 children. But the experience of the eldest will always be different from the experience of the youngest. And the experience of the ones in the middle, again, will be different from the eldest or the youngest, because The eldest is the first to arrive, so to speak, and has all the attention, and then the second and the third and the other ones arrive. So he's no longer in the position of preeminence afterwards, because it has to be shared with all the siblings. So there's a lot of tension and rivalry between so many children, and some children may be more close to the mother, or others closer to the father. That's the lottery of life. One doesn't know how it's going to work out with the different natures of the children relating to the different natures of the parents. But there will be things that wounds and traumas that need to be worked through. The most important thing was the way that the father treated the mother and the way the mother treated the father. What was her relationship with the father? Relaxed and happy and sort of loving towards him, or was she frightened of him? That's another thing. In my own family, my mother was frightened of my father, and I was very frightened of him too. So that was the situation there. And he was frightened of her genius of being a poet and a painter, and interested in channeled messages and things which he wasn't interested in at all. So that made huge tensions. And he had a fierce temper. So that's another thing, temper, mother or father. Whether they had a bad temper and were grumpy and depressed, or whether they were happy and generally in a good mood, you know. So it's a complicated situation, your family, because I know a little bit about it because you've told me. But I think it just has to be worked out between the individual children, what their own relationship is with the parent and what the relationship with the siblings is.
It's not in particular with regard to my family that I was asking the question, but in regard to what unconsciously can cause trauma, and maybe in with one person or the other, it maybe the perception is that there's a different experience. But my question was more, does it inflict trauma anyway?
No, it doesn't inflict trauma anyway. It depends on the personality of the child, what the child is bringing into life, and what the child feels about itself in relation to the parents and in relation to the siblings. And that will depend on each child being completely different, with different gifts, different abilities. But the main thing is to avoid a sense of failure and guilt, the feeling I'm not good enough. That's the feeling to look out for in relation to the siblings, or in relation to the parents' relationship with the child. I'm not good enough to gain the love of my mother or father, or the admiration of my mother and father. So what do I do about it? Do I just give up and not bother, which means that they don't develop their creative abilities? Or do I struggle to find who I am and what I want to do, in spite of everything, in spite of the difficulties of relationship with either parents or siblings? So, I mean, there are the most extraordinary stories of children who have survived the most impossible difficulties, who grow up to be geniuses or very gifted in some way, and who can speak about it very movingly. There are quite a few in this country that I've listened to and heard. And the courage, what a child needs is the courage to persevere in his life path, whatever that may be, regardless of what the relationship with the parents or the siblings were. That is the key thing, is courage, and that comes from the instinct. Okay, thank you. Thank you for asking that question. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Anne. And Lisette, maybe you want to put a link to your book. Lisette has written a book about, for those of you who are eldest daughters in your family, Lisette has written about the eldest daughter effect and how that affects you. And actually, she does retreats about it as well, just on that topic. Maybe
That's how we met.
Yes, that's how we met, was on
With
her
Pamela too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an eldest daughter too.
Of course you are.
Surprise.
Yeah.
How many are eldest daughters? Just by aha. Statistically, quite a few above average, I would imagine. Yeah. Thank you. And was it Yasmin, did you just have your hand up? And yeah, sorry, I've muted everyone, so do unmute yourselves. They're still muted. I'll ask you to unmute and then you can just press the button.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay. And thank you very much. I'm very impressed by all the wisdom you shared today. And Sophie, thank you for making this possible. My question is that, after Esther talked about her siblings and how the parents have different influences on each sibling, my question to Anne is, do you believe in karma? So each person comes with a backpack of the other lives, and then we react accordingly to what happens in this life.
Yes,
You
I do.
yourself, do you believe in karma?
I do. I do believe in karma, and I do believe we've had many lives, and I can see the influence of other lives on my present life, because I didn't know it till recently. But I think that also is an element in the family constellation, because we have no idea. These ideas are not discussed or taught at all in the West. So people have no idea that they might be bringing through things from other lives, fears, angers, resentments, hopes, longings, loves. They might have been the contraception of gender in another life, for instance, a very recent life, in which being in whatever it was not an happy experience. So they would carry that with them too, coming into this life. And they would probably even like to change their gender because they have the memory of the unhappy gender in another life. So that's another factor which is coming in very much into play in present day situations. So yes, I do. I'm certain that one has had karma, and that we have to work out. For instance, I know with my very difficult father, what he was suffering from was a lack of love in his childhood when his mother died when he was 8. But when I knew that, I understood his anger and his depression. But before I knew that, I was just the victim of his anger and depression. So I couldn't in any way relate to him. It was only in his old age that all this was healed, and we had a good relationship at the end when he was in his 90s. So that is an example of perhaps in this life he suffered the loss of the mother, which is a catastrophic experience for a little boy of aged 8. The mother is suddenly gone, whom he loved passionately, and he can never find her again. And he looks to find her in his wife, but she doesn't live up to his image of what his mother was. So he may blame his wife for not being able to be the image of what the mother was. All these very complicated things go on in relationships. But certainly karma does play a big influence, I think, on people's lives.
Thank you. So do you think that you had an insight to your own karma through your father's behavior towards you? So
No, not necessarily.
understanding that his relationship with the mother and loss of the mother, and so no, it's not that. Okay.
No, it's too complicated. It gets too complicated if you go into every single detail. There is obviously something in another life that needed to be worked out in this one, which was worked out with difficulty, but it came from another life. And as I said, the wound came to him in this life, but he may have come from something in another life where there was an equal wound of some kind. Well, and my mother also might have carried things from another life. She was very aware of other lives.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you.
And Isabel has asked in the chat, can you please explain how do we choose to come to this world?
Well, apparently we do have a choice at a certain stage. For a long time, we may not have a choice. We just come back without knowing why we're coming or what reason is bringing us here. But at a certain stage, I think we do have a choice, and we can choose our parents. And with the all the problems and difficulties that might come with choosing those parents, but those parents will help us to develop into who we are meant to be. with difficulties, but they will be there as the background, as it were, of how we grow into who we are and who we're meant to be. And this may not become apparent with me. It didn't become apparent till I was about 50. Well, that's a hell of a long time to spend not knowing who you are or what you're doing and coming into this life, but not really having a clear purpose or sense of what your gift might be. And my gift came through a dream, which you'll read about in my book, when I was about 45, and that changed my life. So one needs to be aware of dreams as well as pointers to what one is meant to become.
Thank you. That's a very good reminder. Be aware of dreams as pointers to what one is meant to become. Other questions? I think, Pamela, did you have your hand up at some point and I missed you? No, okay. Other questions?
What about your questions, Sophie?
Yes, well, I have 10 pages now. I would like to ask Anne, because I've also read Ian McGilchrist's work, The Master's Emissary, and then The Matter with Things, and chatted with him a few times about it. And when I read it, I see the right hemisphere seems to describe in so many ways the qualities of the feminine principle in terms of the functions of the right hemisphere. And the left hemisphere seems to describe what in many traditions seem to relate to the masculine principle. And I know that Ian has said many times and also says in his books, it's not that the right brain is the female and the left brain is the masculine. So he specifically says that. And I wonder if you have chatted about your work together and found kind of insights. I also noticed, I found it so helpful when you shared that it was 623 BC that the goddess was thrown out of the first temple in Jerusalem, and that was a huge turning point. And then I noticed at some point in one of Ian's books, he says something to the effect that the left hemisphere became dominant in the 6th century BC. And I thought, ooh, that's an interesting connection. I haven't had a moment to ask him about it, but have you chatted about your work together? Have you found some red threads or insights that you share?
Well, I'm very close to a friend of his called David Lorimer, so we have had talks, but I haven't actually been one-to-one with him ever, I don't think. I've listened to his talks, and that's about all. But I can see that he's guided by a very wonderful anima. But he wouldn't know about Jungian psychology. He doesn't know about Jungian psychology, and I don't think he's interested because his field of interest is what he's in, so to speak. And I wouldn't describe the right-hand brain as feminine, but it is much more connected with the heart, whereas the left hemisphere is definitely not connected with the heart. It's connected much more with the mental side of things, mind, intellect, and goal achievement, and vistas of what needs to be done. Whereas the right is more how things are going to be done, what manner of things will they be done in, so to speak. It's a different emphasis altogether. And working the way through his books, which take huge amount of effort to read because they're so long, I see that all the time he is talking about the influence of the anima, but he wouldn't use those words. He won't use the words anima and animus. And he wouldn't talk about, well, he does talk about soul. He says we're in a battle for the soul. And in effect, we're in battle for the right hemisphere connecting to the heart. He's definitely said that in a lecture he gave about 3 or 4 months ago. And this is I put it in my book as well. So he's a most wonderful man whose heart is very well developed and a mind very well developed, very well balanced between the two. And out of that has come this huge creativity. Perfect balance between the two leads to this creative work. And he's working on another book now. So I don't know what he'll come up with, but I wish in a way that he'd had a Jungian analysis, because I think he'd even understand himself better than he does.
Would it be fair, because I'm always looking at what are some practical things that we can do in our lives in terms of reestablishing or understanding, embodying the feminine principle. Would it be fair to say that because the right hemisphere is connected to the heart, that doing more to cultivate or to use the perspective of the right hemisphere would be a way of strengthening the feminine principle within us? Or is that stretch?
No, it would. It's anything which makes you feel happy to be alive, which makes you feel connected. That's related. That's the relationship side of the feminine, which is so important, that needs to be nourished. It's like a plant which you put in the earth, and if you don't water it, it just withers and either gets frosted or something and dies because it hasn't had enough attention. So it's a question of attention to what makes you feel happy, to what makes you feel alive, to what brings pleasure to other people, to what releases your creative feeling of what you want to do with your life and makes you happy to actually be alive. Because all the time life is flowing through you in this great river of life. And what you do in the middle of that river depends on you making a choice between either just going along blindly and ignorantly, or becoming aware of where the river is taking you or would like to take you. It's a different kind of focus, a different way of looking at life as a blessing instead of a problem. Yes?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
And also, I think I'd like to say that in my own life, I have to divide my life between the practical things which I do in the morning. I've done the shopping this morning for the week or whatever. I've gone to the oculist to see about my eyes. I've done this, that, and the other. Whereas the afternoon is devoted to my work or to music or to poetry or to just sitting, doing nothing, and just thinking about how lovely life is, or how blessed I am really to have such a lucky life where I've lived to an old age. I can do what I want. I've done what I came to do. And that's where karma came in, because I know I came to this earth to do something, and I know I've done it now. I've completed my work. So I can relax and be happy about that. So dividing your life into sort of different sections is quite helpful. If you try and do everything at once, you get in a muddle and you get exhausted. But if you can separate categories which need attention into different hours of the day, it really does help.
Thank you. I can see everyone writing down this. Maybe at some point we can compare our list of Anne's advice and make practical steps. Yeah.
Well, the main thing is to realize that life is a miracle. And when you feel this wonderful spring all around us, how the green just comes from one night to another almost. Suddenly the green is there on every tree and every branch. That is a miracle. And we are miracles. We are born like the leaves, as it were, to live this life. And that's such a beautiful idea, that we've come into incarnation almost as a blessing, particularly those of us who live privileged lives in relation to the rest of the people who suffered so much with war and famine and God knows what. So it's something to really be in touch with, this feeling of living life which is flowing through you and living all around you in nature. Very important to stay in touch with nature, and to have a little garden if you can, or have a plant in your windowsill, whatever it is, have a little bit of nature to share your life with you.
maybe it's not the right place to ask, but Anne, I just admire your presence and how you hold the space here. And I'm just wondering, what do you eat?
Well, I'm not a vegetarian. I eat normal food. I don't eat a lot in the evening. I usually have soup and a piece of bread for supper. And my main meal is at lunch. I have to feed my husband, think about what food he likes to eat. We have a carer, so I have to think about her needs as well. So in principle, I lead a sort of normal non-vegetarian diet. And we had lasagna for lunch, for instance. So I'm not particular about it. I have no hang-ups about it, but I don't need to eat a lot now. I notice that I need to eat less in my old age than I did when I was 50 or 60. And because I'm not doing so much physically. And I have to also take care of my body now, that my legs are not too good, my eyesight's not too good. So those things need good food. I eat a lot of fruit. I always have an apple for lunch and usually some kind of fruit for supper as well. And for breakfast, I have yogurt, blueberries, 4 prunes, and some seeds, like linseeds or sunflower seeds mixed up into the yogurt. So my nourishing breakfast is mainly that. And the main meal of the day is the breakfast, really, or the most nourishing meal. Thank you for the question.
And this conversation nourished me. Thank you.
Good.
I realize we've gone a little over time. Are there any last burning questions?
Shall I read those few things that if I can get back? I don't know if I can get back to do the...
You could share again, and maybe just to say, Anne, you know, well, I'll thank you now as you're doing that. And you know, we've all, I know, been nourished by your wisdom here. And with this group of women, I very intentionally invited women who are in some ways in their life, through either being mothers or in their work, doing really impactful work in their lives. And so also an invitation as you do these last slides, and as you've said, you've done everything you came here to do in this life. If there's any wisdom in addition to what you've shared that you'd like to pass on to this group of women who have influence in different ways in their lives, that you'd like us to continue sharing on your behalf, please do share that as well as you go through, if anything comes to mind. And thank you.
Well, I think it's just that the Eastern teachings have been a tremendous influence on my life, and I love to return to the Upanishads, and that's what I was going to read you, just a few of them, because unless one has this kind of magnetic attraction to something which has great meaning for you, it's very difficult to live life in a kind of barren desert with no help at all. So you have to find what gives you help. And I find that these Upanishads give me the feeling of connection with the divine. I don't know if I can, don't know if they're going to go on. No, they're not going to move, so I don't know what I can do. I'm stuck. Can you move them from where you are?
I don't think I can, but if you click on the slide, it may move itself.
Oh, it has, I think. Yes, here we are. All the sacred literature of India, from the Vedas through the Upanishads to the treatises on yoga and the Buddhist sutras, teaches the method of inner growth which leads to the experience of awakening, enlightenment, or union with the divine ground. The lotus was and is the symbol of this process of growth from unseen depths to ultimate flowering. So this is true of all of us. We've come from unseen depths and we're moving towards ultimate flowering. And I think that's such a beautiful image. So I'll just see what it says here. So I've said the Atman. I'm going to leave that one and go on to this one. Thine own consciousness, shining, void, and inseparable from the great body of radiance, hath no birth nor death, and is the immutable light. Now, what could be more beautiful than that? Thine own consciousness, shining, void, and inseparable from the great body of radiance, hath no birth nor death, and is the immutable light. And this is from Ravi Ravindra in his book, Science and the Sacred. He's a great teacher. The oneness or unity of all that exists is the one central insight into truth to which all Indian wisdom points. This insight is not alien to other cultures, but in India all the great sages again and again return to it. Although the truth is easily stated as all is one, the sages have also said that the realization of this truth in the core of one's being can take many lifetimes. And the realization of this truth is held to be the purpose of human existence. All art, philosophy, and science, if they are true, reflect this vision and further its realization. That's something I remind myself, because it is difficult to understand the all is one and that we're all part of the one. Then this one, glory to be that God who is in the fire, who is in the waters, who is in the plants and trees, who is in all things in this vast creation. Unto that Spirit be glory and glory. That's someone who really had seen into the heart of everything. He who sees that the Lord of all is ever the same in all that is, immortal in the field of mortality, he sees the truth. And when a man sees that the God in himself is the same God in all that is, he hurts not himself by hurting others, then he goes indeed to the highest path. And finally, only through constant love can I be known and seen as I really am and entered into. Fix your mind on me, give your heart's love to me, consecrate all your actions to my service, hold your own self as nothing before me. To me you will come, truly I promise, for you are dear to me. So I think if we can remember that we are dear to the love which has given birth to us, and if we focus on that love flowing to us from the divine heart of being, we will radiate love to the world in everything that we do, in the small things as well as the big things. So I think that's what I would leave you with, to become radiators of love.
Become radiators of love. Thank you, Anne. And thank you for embodying that for us in this session and the previous one. I know we've all felt very nourished in both our hearts and our minds, learned a lot through your sessions. And if anyone would like to say anything or write in the chat, please feel very welcome. And thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. And I'm putting in the chat one more time the link to order Anne's new book if you're in the UK, directly from the publisher. And you can also get it on Amazon globally at the end of this month. Anne, thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you for asking me, Sophie. That's, first of all, to be asked is lovely, and to be able to speak. I know it was quite a difficult session because there was so much in it, but I felt it was important to give people a deeper view of what we are really, and what we're composed of. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone, for joining.